All right. So, Dave, first things first, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that this is not like a normal thing that you do, and uh, sort of my focus today is to show some appreciation to you in what you do for us here as Magic the Gathering players and as a content creator. So, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I've been enjoying lots of recognition and praise for the set. So yeah, I appreciate the thread you started on Twitter and some other ones that have been going around. It's fun to see it. Since certainly we as designers take our fair share of criticism at times. So it's nice to get the other half of things.
Yeah, and it's really complicated as well because I feel like you are almost my number one benefactor in the sense that whenever you do great work, like my work is also good, if that makes sense. It's like if you're doing great work in the architecture that you're designing Magic the Gathering sets, then my work is very easy, right? Like I am just so excited every single day to like jump out of bed and like play Magic, make content. And whenever that's not true, the difference is like night and day. It's almost painful, right? Where it's like, oh man, what am I gonna do today? Like I don't really understand what I should be doing as a creator. So you do play a very, very big role in my life as a streamer, as a creator, as a player.
Yeah, no, yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Yeah, you definitely want to be passionate about the stuff and looking forward to the stuff you're doing. I get right a lot of why I'm doing my job is I'm passionate about it. I could be certainly doing other things, but I makes a lot of sense to be following your passion and be excited about the stuff you're trying to do every day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. All right, so there is a slight echo people have been saying. Give me just 1 second here. I know it's a bit unprofessional, but I'm gonna try to put on headphones here. All right. So I guess while I'm doing this, can you go ahead and tell the viewers a little bit about your history, both as a Magic the Gathering player? I know that you're a Hall of Famer, and also as your role at Magic the Gathering at Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been playing since like the spring of 1994, so I've been playing a long time. I won the first Ice Age pre-release, which got me invited to the first Pro Tour because they were looking for like kind of like ways to figure out how to get sort of known players into that event. So I didn't have to make the phone call to get in the first Pro Tour. And then I played in like something like 48 of the first 50 Pro Tours. I had a couple ninth place heartbreaking finishes, and then I finally started to get some top eights. So I won the first Team Pro Tour with like on Your Move Games with Rob Doherty and Darwin Castle. I had like 4 other top eights, individual top eights. Like as a team we also won a Grand Prix. I won an individual Grand Prix. I was certainly more known for, I mean, I guess I had like I had back-to-back top 4s in Worlds. So like my limited game was okay, but I was certainly more known for my constructed game. I got inducted into the Hall of Fame in the second class. I've been working at Wizards for like 13 years. So the first set I was hired on as like the development manager, and then I was also doing development. It's funny in terms of like my beginnings. The first set that I led final designer development for was Avacyn Restored, which is certainly not amongst the most highly regarded limited sets. And then I led the development of a bunch of sets, and then starting with like Dominaria, like the Dominaria that released in 2018. That's like when the process sort of changed, and we changed to a process where I was the final. I was the set design lead as opposed to the like development lead. So we had like another like many more months. Like I had ownership of the file for a lot longer period of time than ever before. We kind of switched process where kind of like the just who owned the files switched a lot at that point. From like Dominaria forward, like the stuff you have in the sort of the title here. Yeah, like Dominaria. Actually, KLD would normally be Kaladesh, so KHM, Kaldheim,
KHM.
or KHM, yeah.
KHM, okay.
Yeah. But so yeah, Neon Dynasty, Ikoria, Ward Spark, Mom, like all those were my set design leads where I had like, I had like kind of a lot more say and a lot more time to work on the file.
All right. So how did that experience change going from a player to a person who was designing the cards themselves? Did you lose a little bit of that magic there? You know what I mean? So now in a way you are the Wizard of Oz, right? Like you are the man behind the curtain instead of the player who gets to be like Dorothy and just gets to experience the set as the story unfolds.
Yeah, it's a lot different. I mean, like one thing I did leave out in terms of like, right, I was talking about my Magic background, but I did work for like 7 or 8 years as a game designer, like a competing company. So I was sort of already used to that. But I mean, it's a lot different. I mean, it's definitely a different mindset. It's like, you sort of have to correct for, right, like what's like kind of what's in the best interest of like the game in the long term and what's sustainable and what's right. It's not all about like trying to understand what's fun as opposed to like, like a lot of my mindsets, would be about winning or figuring out how to win. Like that's not like, right. That's not really what your job is. Like you're trying to figure out what the good strategies are and understand those and stuff, but it's a very different mindset that you have to have. And it's also tricky because like, especially like probably one of my strengths more was like finding like combos and like figuring out what are the best combinations of cards and how do I keep refining those. And like, I think I was just really good at refining, but like, it's just a very different skill set when you're like, if you're in development and you find something that's wrong and you think it's going to be problematic, you change it. So like, it's not like you could spend like days figuring out like, how do I build the best like combo deck? And then like, okay, it's like, well, I'm just going to change the cards and now the combo's not there. And like, so it's like all of that time is like, I mean, at that point it's sort of out the window, right? Like you've done all this work figuring something out and then like, well, like, no, that's not relevant anymore. So it takes a very different mindset than you might think. And you're right, like a lot of it's just you're trying to figure out like kind of like we talk about net fun a lot, but like what is right, something can be fun for you but not, is it worth it if it's really not fun for your opponent, and trying to find a sweet spot where like just the overall fun in the game is as high as you can get it.
Okay, so actually on that point, one of the things that I would like to talk about is that one of my claims to fame, and I think one of the reasons why my channel even got a lot of traction in the beginning was in Ravnica Allegiance with the archetype called Clear the Mind, right? So you have this 3-mana sorcery that all it does is it just shuffles your graveyard back to your deck and you draw a card. Like very unassuming card. Like this card is it doesn't look like it does anything, right? Like in the beginning of the format. So what I do on Twitch is I rate sets. I do like tier lists, right? So I do tier lists and I sort of analyze each cards and see where it sits in a format. And this is a very fun exercise in my opinion. It's not necessarily about like trying to see how good the cards actually are. It's more about the mental exercise of it. And Clear the Mind for me, I rate it as like an F tier card, right? Like this card is not playable. Like why would you ever want this in a Magic the Gathering limited environment? But as a result of this card essentially created this whole sort of sub-archetype of a drafting strategy that revolved around, just having card draw effects and removal spells. And this was extremely fun for me as a player. But I don't know how fun this was for my opponents, right? Like my opponents were just kind of sitting through it and they're like, all right, well, what is happening here? I have like 5 removal spells in my hand, but Deathsie's not playing any creatures. What in the world is happening? Like what is happening? So this experience kind of ties into what you said, where these things are designed as a way to be fun, but is it fun for both players? And so can you emphasize on that a little bit? And do you try to actively avoid putting strategies like this in sets? And do you believe that this is fun for the opponent?
I mean, like, I think in general, what you're talking about is fine in small doses. Like, I think if it's hard to put exact percentage on it, but like if even like 15% of your matches are against that, you're probably not going to be having much of a good time. I think like that's the sort of thing where like even like a combo deck and constructed or whatever, there's a certain amount of tolerance. I think, right, that there's a certain amount of novelty when like, oh, you play against that and didn't even realize that was a thing, and then like, oh, maybe you'll try it like once or twice, and right, like, but yeah, we you know, and then like at that point you start getting like mirror matches where that's something we also has to think about, where it's like, if you're playing that and your opponent's playing that, then like, yeah, at that point, maybe you're not even going to be having a fun time or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, like, I think, right, like I was telling you, I think even before the stream that, right, like I remember I had played you in Strixhaven and like you had played like, what is it, Cogwork Archivist, and then like I was playing you and it's like, oh, like, you know, and then I killed it and like, oh, you know, I think I got you now, and then you played like another Cogwork Archivist, and then like yeah, like I didn't see that come in, and then like, yeah, so you right, then the one brought the other back, and it's like, yeah, that was cool, and then like, right, then I start like, oh, I didn't even really, I mean, I put in cards like that actually in a lot of my sets. I was actually sort of known for like I think it's like Epitaph Golem and some other cards way back when, but so I definitely appreciated that as a strategy, but I didn't really realize that it could work in Strixhaven. So then I was doing that more, and then I was mentioning like that was like one of the things that like, that's why I put in just like, oh, I'm gonna put in the Phyrexian version and Mom just in case that comes up again. Like, at least it's like, I think that card's like just barely playable in March the Machine, but like at least it's like a 5/4 reach creature, which is kind of relevant with battles and stuff. But I've played it a couple times at least.
Yeah, the 4/5 reach, right? Yeah, it's a 4/5 even. And so like in my mind, this sort of approach to set design is almost like having an Easter egg. You know, putting these little Easter eggs in a format for players to almost like at some point as the format progresses, players may find, and I don't think players always necessarily have to find it, right? Like, I think back in Paper Magic, back in Paper Magic and F&M drafts at the local game store, we didn't necessarily draft enough to always find these strategies, right? But in the day and age of Magic Arena, where people are playing so much, like I'm playing way more Magic than I ever did back in the day, just because of the replayability of it. And even back when I was playing Magic Online, like Magic Online, I couldn't play as much as I play Magic Arena, right? It's just the sort of barrier to entry, the sort of barrier to getting a draft going and to getting a draft played. In this day and age, one of the things I really appreciate is that Magic Arena just allows us to play so much Magic. So with that in mind, it's like, do you enjoy putting like Easter eggs in formats here and there? I'm not sure if this framing of the Easter egg makes a lot of sense to you, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little tricky because I do feel like it's hard to be super subtle, and I feel like in some ways like some of the Easter eggs are not even really like, I mean, again, we do try to put in a little bit, but some of it just comes about like and sometimes just kind of surprising ways to even us, where like, right, I mean, there's something like a spider spawning, I think to some extent, like I know like Eric Lauer led that set and led Khans of Tarkir, which were, you know, again, great sets, especially in that era. And right, again, I think some of that was intentional, but then yeah, they're always like, I'm trying to think of like what good examples now and like some of the more recent sets, but there's definitely stuff that comes up that's like kind of still surprises us, and like we didn't really see that people would kind of go that way with the strategies.
All right. How about this as an example? How about in Kaldheim? Did you expect Gold Vein Pick to sort of take off the way that it did? I think that was one of my claim to fames in Kaldheim, was me just basically putting Gold Vein Pick on the map and having these strategies where you can just kind of be base any color and then splash everything else off of the treasures that the Gold Vein Pick makes.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't think we expected it to hit to the extent it did, and getting put on like the 1-drop white flyer and stuff like that. but yeah, it's like, right, a lot of those things are like just like gold vein pick and whatever are the types of cards where it's like we've made cards kind of like this, or at least equipment like this, and they're usually not quite good enough. And like, yeah, I feel like I'm very much all about like, all right, I'm gonna, I'm gonna keep buffing this style of card and keep buffing it more until it finally does something. So, right. So yeah, I think, yeah, that definitely surprised us in that it was more, yeah, more ubiquitous than we thought it would be in a much bigger part of the format. I mean, I do think by and large, like 3+ color decks tend to underperform. So I'm also of the mind that like we want to help those decks. So like, I think I'm also probably one of my other trademarks is always pretty much insisting that I get some of the land slots to be the ETB tapped lands, and a lot of that's just like mana fixing is not as good as it could be for draft, and I just like I want to try to find out ways to like let's make 3-color decks more competitive with 2-color decks, and and just have like 2-color decks you don't so often like not draw your second color to.
True, yes. And so we have Watsy staff, Melissa Del Torre, here in the chat. Melissa asks, Goldvin pick, you mean Black Lotus? So this was a comparison that I actually made back then. It's like, well, if I had to compare this to Black Lotus, isn't this just kind of better? It's like augmenting a stat line. It's like repeatable. It lets you play like other colors where Black Lotus will let me cast the thing one time, right? I can't really build a deck around that. So, Golden Pick was something that was like very, very fun to me. That opened up a huge can of worms that in a way it shifted the format and it created more replayability later down the line, right? So we think about alchemy and these sort of perspectives these days where it's like, all right, well, how do we make a format more fun later on? How do we create this sort of sense of replayability? And I feel like putting cards like Clear the Mind and Goldvein Pick into a set, in a way, naturally does that. Because as the format goes on and these sort of Easter egg strategies become discovered, you get this whole shift in a meta where it's like, all right, well, these things are good now. So actually the ratings and evaluations for all these other cards have changed as well. And that is one of the most exciting things for me, both as a player and as a content creator. Right, seeing the meta shift and evolve like a living being. So that's one of the things that is a hallmark of a good draft format for me. This is what I need to see in a draft format to make it be like, okay, this is great. This is a great draft format. Things are changing as we play. Things are being discovered, and I'm sort of curious for your opinion if you think that is as important as maybe I have sort of framed it here.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's very important. Right. A lot of our job now, as you were saying in sort of the earlier thing, like about how much more you draft than you used to, like we know people are drafting sets like 100 times or whatever, which like, yeah, I think like probably rarely happened in the past. I mean, certainly there have been other ways to play digital Magic for quite some time, Magic Online, but I do get the sense like, yeah, looking at numbers that, right, we really need to have up our game in terms of like, people are going to play this a ton of times. You need to keep coming up with ways that people are still going to find it enjoyable. Yeah. Like, when they've done dozens and dozens of drafts, I think, yeah, what you're talking about is really cool. If like, yeah, if we can like put in enough little like kernels of things that people can start going after, and just like if like we have signposts, and a lot of it is like signposts is more trying to be there to like kind of like hold people's hands, like when they start, right? Like this is like, if you do this, like we've hopefully not let you down. If we tell you that like this color pair is about this, if you try to do that and take the cards that say that word or do that thing, then like, you'll have a good time. But like, right, the format's not going to be super robust, and you're not going to want to keep playing it if that's like just what you're supposed to do every time, right? Like if every time you're just like, all right, I'm going to be white, blue, and I'm going to take all the knights I see, like that's not going to have you wanting to come back for more like day after day. So yeah, we like, I think, right, the signposts are more like, this is one thing you can do, but I try to make sure that like there's still, right, a lot of other things that you want to try, and a lot of cards that are not just pointing to the same words. Like even, like there's still some stuff in Mom that I kind of still want to try out more, just like cards that are like kind of underperforming, like Rada, where I've been like, like, oh, like I want to like try to play Rada with some like in a 5-color deck with some vehicles where you're
Yes.
tapping her to get the bonus, and just little things like that where like I still haven't gotten around to that, but like I still want to try it, and like trying to build in things where like there's still going to be little things here or there that people might want to try out like at least once or twice.
That's awesome. So on that note about Rada, that is something that I've been exploring a lot, because I think that there's this general consensus in March of the Machine that that red is the most underpowered color. And actually, as a result of that, draft being this sort of organic being, is that red is generally a little bit more open than it should be. And these strategies are so much fun. I've been having so much fun playing these like 5-color base red-green strategies with Rada and these vehicles, and using Rada essentially as a combat trick, right? So it's like you'll go into combat and you'll have a Rada up and a vehicle. Even if you attack with that vehicle, you can still crew again to tap the Rada and put it basically on anything to get a favorable block, to get a favorable attack after the opponent blocks. So that has been really, really enjoyable for me. Like, Rada is not a card really on anybody's radar, I don't think. I have kind of questioned why Rada is on the bonus list for the format because the dual lands don't have types. So having domain in this format is a little bit more difficult than it normally would be as well. So that has been extremely enjoyable for me. I love the inclusion of Rada. So I would like to move on to talking about the design space of both the bonus sheet, the Multiverse Legends here in March of the Machine, as well as companions. And I know that you are the lead for Ikoria, one of my favorite draft formats as well. Ikoria having the companions, in my opinion, companions is actually the most fun thing that has happened to Magic in the last 5 years. And I know that there's a lot of controversy around it, especially regarding older formats like Vintage, Modern, Legacy, stuff like that. But give me some insight into the sort of replayability factor and introducing strategies like companions and having a bonus sheet like the Multiverse Legends in March of the Machine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I'll start with companions. I mean, yeah, like companions, yeah, for all of the, I guess, yeah, like people are certainly all over the place on how much they like companions. I mean, they're certainly a contentious card, and I understand why they're contentious cards. I do think for limited, they're great. Like, I mean, I right, like, part of the thing is when we did the companions in Ikoria, we spent a lot of time trying to make them work for limited. Like we like part of the problem with companions is that we were trying to do too many things with them. I feel like we were trying to make sure that they were good for limited, that they had like that the words worked for limited, that they like could be cards that you could put 4 ofs in your deck if you wanted to, and that they could also be companions. Like we bit off more than we could chew with like just those designs. But yeah, for limited, I think they're great. I mean, I think I was a little bit curious to see how they play out with like the pay 3 to put them in your hand. Certainly I knew that would make some of them not as cool, and like I knew stuff like Kahira was kind of laughable to be in the set, but I wasn't going to do just like 9 of them or whatever.
Sure.
I did start a draft where my first 3 picks were companions, and I was wondering like I should almost just do Kahira for fun here. Like I think like, and I noticed like the Swamp Cycler is on team too, but I did not go that route. But yeah, like I think companions just add a lot of like dimension. Like, oh yeah, like it's right, like they create experiences that you've just never really had before, right? And like unless you've done like some sort of stipulation draft or something like with friends or whatever is part of some other thing. Like it's just like, all right, well I have one kill spell, like I can't take the second kill spell because I have Lutri, like, if like it's the same card or whatever, like I'm gonna try to build a 60 card deck, like this is weird, like what do I need to prioritize for like a 60 card limited deck, or right, like all of them just like, right, I've been naming some of the ones that are some of the ones that I think create the most novel experiences, but there, there's still stuff like right, some of the others are still doing pretty weird stuff in terms of like, wow, I really need to evaluate start cards differently.
Like maybe Garuda and Obosh, something like that.
Yeah. Those are really good ones. Like Garuda, I think like you probably like. I guess both of those you could probably pull off. But yeah, it's certainly painful. Like trying to like, oh yeah, like if I'm doing this, like, oh, I can't play any of the 4-mana kill cards because I'm doing evens, or yeah, like or sorry, if I'm doing odds. But yeah, like you learn some of the stuff that you can't be doing, and then like there's stuff like Karuga is kind of my style more anyways, where I tend to draft kind of more ridiculous longer game decks, and Karuga is like right up my alley, where it's just what I don't need 1 and 2 drops, so I'll just like I'll find a way. So it's fun. I mean then I guess more generally on the multiverse sheet, right, like a lot of it, again, a lot of that stuff with our goals is like making cards people want for constructed too, right? Like the rares and mythics are largely about like what do people want for constructed. The uncommons, I mean, it's tricky too, because the uncommons, like unless I change rarity on cards, like there aren't as many options as you might think. Like with like red green as an example, like I wasn't happy with any of the red green uncommon legends. There just aren't many, especially if once you're working under the assumption that like all these people need to be alive and in this timeline and whatever, like could actually be fighting here. Like I think like Grumgully, if I'm getting the name right, was like the only other option actually. And that card, like I started with Grumgully, but it wasn't interesting. I guess I'll use the word interesting, which is kind of like a tricky word, but like it just like, all right, it's a good card. It's a strong card. You want to put it in your deck. It doesn't affect what you put in your deck though. It's just like, it's mostly, I mean, yes, it matters like what creature types they have, but it just fundamentally, it wasn't very interesting. It was just kind of like a strong card and it didn't affect your draft at all. So like with uncommons, I was very much more trying like also to choose cards that like, all right, my pick order is going to change because this is cards here. Yeah, I felt like that Rada was the best example of that, where like we already wanted we already wanted red green to be a little bit of like in the exploration of like how many battles can I put in my deck, and it like that sort of meant also like, right, like the one red green battle is giving you treasure, though, like that we have a fair bit of like either treasure or searching lands or getting to lands and permanents, so that like red green was set up to be the multicolor or one of the multicolor color pairs. So I felt like Rada, at least in theory, fit in well to that. Like, I mean, I agree with you, like that it's tricky with the dual lands not assisting like it did in Dominaria United, but I think like, there's still like, well, like Fertilid's Favor is like one of my pet cards. Like I just put that in practically all my decks. And then, if certainly then like Invasion of Zendikar and stuff too. But yeah, I felt like there was enough there to do there. But yeah, like like overall, I'm still actually pretty happy with like most all the uncommons. Like it was tricky because I had to like lock in on the Dominaria United uncommons before I even knew what they were going to be in their final form. Like they were not done, they were not done when I put them in my set. I mean, they were done by the time I finalized my set, but I had sort of committed to those. Like, all right, like I can see what the design is in the file, but if the lead of Dominaria United wants to change the cards, I'm not going to really be able to. I'm not going to have much of a say in that. Right? They needed to be the best they could be for that environment. Like, there's stuff like Rona, like I don't know that's doing a ton for the format, but I mean, I see people play it against me. I haven't played it much myself.
Yeah, I think Rona is a very interesting one, because Rona has been one that has kind of led me to question just like, when do I ever want this in my deck, I suppose, because Rona, the 4-mana Rona, she is very difficult to cast as well, and this format, March of the Machine, it feels very like, it is value-oriented, but it's also just so incredibly tempo-oriented with the battles coming into play as well. And this sort of play-draw dynamic that to me is an ongoing question of, how do we solve play and draw in a world where cards are getting stronger? So there's a power creep where the sort of going second advantage in the past has not really come up in maybe like the past 4 or 5 years. So like this sort of play and draw dynamic in Magic, especially in Limited and especially on Magic Arena, where Hand Smoother plays a factor into that as well. And I'm not sure if you agree with this, but to me, it feels like it does make things more aggressive. So this sort of exacerbation on how good going first is in Magic these days, and then having battles, and then to a lesser extent planeswalkers factoring into that as well. How exactly do we approach this from a game design perspective, Dave?
Yeah, it is hard to spend like too much of like your design words, I guess, focused on that issue. We definitely take stock of that. We definitely, right, we want to put power into cards where the cards can be good if you're behind, right? Like I'm trying to think of like, I mean, like as far as dispersal, if I'm using the card right, is like,
Yep.
you know, that card was definitely put in the set because it's like, wow, it's too easy to fall behind. We want to make a card that's stronger if you're behind than if you're ahead. So we definitely, there are always like a few cards, and like usually a card like kind of almost even in each color that we're trying to do, like where it's like, this is going to be played better if you're behind, or play stronger if you're behind. You know, still totally a functional card if you're ahead. And just little things like that. I mean, like I think like also just over the years right, like we don't want to make 2-drops that are like kind of like, oh, if your opponent, like I don't like, I want to avoid bashing on other people's sets, but let's take like, for example, like one, you know, it's at rare, so all it chooses in like the 2/3 Merfolk at rare and green.
Yep.
Right, like if that card were uncommon, I think that would just be a pretty unfun card, right? Where it's just like, oh, did you have a 2-drop? Nope. Okay, like the game spirals out of control. Like you know, I think it's fine for rare and like doing what we need to do for rare there, but like I use that as an example of more generally where we don't want to make mechanics that like we have oftentimes in the past, where it's like, oh, like this is my 2-drop check. Like if you miss your 2-drop, the game's over. And trying to avoid that as much as possible, certainly at the forefront of my mind. But yeah, just in general, like trying to design cards that allow for comebacks. I think, fortunately, I think Convoke's a tricky one, because Convoke plays both well when you've got a good draw because you have the creatures out to use it, but it also can play well from behind because you can leave up everything to block, and like after your opponent's declared their attacks, like all those creatures you've left up to block help you when you're like trying to defend yourself. So I do think Convoke kind of plays it both ways, but also can definitely help you get back into games. But yeah, just I mean more generally, the question is, I think it's hard to address the play draw thing directly. I think a lot of that is more assuming that the player who is on the play is often going to be ahead and trying to snowball and trying to make cards that allow for comebacks is the main way that I more try to approach it. Other than like, I mean, I talked about like the 2-drop example is a little bit different, but a lot of that's just more designing cards that don't have too much strength. Like this card is good if you're on the play and bad if you're on the draw, and trying to come up with tweaks to the card or rewordings to the card or slight changes of the cards where that's less so the case, that there's more of a balance of like right, that there's just more potential for comeback, there's less chance to snowball. Like I also like, this isn't exactly addressing your point, but I think it also relates, as like I love making cards where the trumpet blast, like I often put on the trumpet blast, like, and you get something that's only good if you're playing more turns, right? Like it's just like I'm gonna like trumpet blast, usually it's just the last card you play and you do +2 to your team and your opponent's dead, right? So like I'm gonna like, right, just and like just kind of as an example, like I'm gonna put words on that card that only matter if there's another turn, so you like might actually use it to do other things. And like it's kind of the extreme example, but like trying to like, right, like I'm gonna give you like maybe a a buff that gives your creature reach for the rest of the game. And then like that's only like you know, you might use it a combat trick, but then it's going to help you stabilize later rather than help you push ahead later. So putting strength on cards that like can do one thing but can then like after the effect, right, you're only mostly getting power for like defensive reasons, or if the game goes longer after that, if that makes sense.
So so building on your point there, One of the cards that has really stood out to me in March of the Machine is kind of an unassuming card, but this is a card that every single time I'm playing these like 5-color piles and I'm companioning like Lutri, or I'm companioning Gigantha, Yorion, whatever it may be, and I'm playing these like 4 or 5-color piles, is this 2-mana 3/1 in green named Wary Thespian. It's a very unassuming card. So Wary Thespian says whenever it enters the battlefield or dies, you surveil 1. And this card has kind of been the bane of my existence in this format, because, you know, a lot of times I'm on the draw and I'm all my lands are coming in tapped, and I see my opponent play a Wary Thespian 2-mana 3/1, and I'm like, all right, I guess I started the game at 11 HP because this thing's just gonna connect with me multiple times, and I can't block with my with my mana dork or something like that. I can't block my other thing, and that has kind of been a feels bad for me in the format. So Wary Thespian has been one that I've really just been like, oh, every single time I see this guy's just killing me, you know. So I guess my point on that is that one of the things I would have loved to see in this format is maybe an artifact creature at common, or maybe even uncommon. Like something like a 2-mana 0/4 or a 2-mana 1/4, something like that. Just like some sort of maybe it's a defender, maybe it does something like very weird. But that would have been really nice for me, in my opinion, to play out into these multicolor strategies.
Yeah, it's a fair note. Yeah, it's true that there's not a whole lot like that. You just got to play your own Wary Thespian. That's what I do.
Yes.
But yeah, there's not much that you want to be trading off of, especially in the decks like you're describing. I'd agree. Yeah, Wary Thespian's definitely my go-to for the decks you're describing, just because, like, yeah, I mean, I love that card just in terms of, right, like, that's another thing I really like to do is just have, like, 2 drops that smooth draws.
Yep.
Right, like, I mean, I guess, yeah, we've seen a couple iterations of that, and I definitely want it to use more, but just even, like, the Strixhaven card that, like, searches for a land and puts it on top, which was also in 1, right? A variant of that. But yeah, I think it's really important to have 2 drops that smooth draws. Like, I feel like perhaps one of the most frustrating things for limited for me is just like, you keep a 2-lander and you don't draw your 3rd land. So I feel like more and more and more, like, wherever I can, I'm trying to make 2 drops that let you get to your 3rd drop, which the Thespian's doing. Like, also, I mean, like, in the end, like, we didn't have land cyclers in the set for a long time, but yeah, land cyclers are certainly doing that too. Yeah, I think just trying to get more ways from the 2 to the 3 mana is pretty huge, which is an aside from your question. But yeah, like, I think, yeah, a 0/4 for the deck like you're describing is totally doable. So sometimes I feel like those have not necessarily been playable in some of the other formats, like where just like a straight up wall type thing tends to not get the job done. But yeah, no reason we couldn't have put it in the set, really.
Sure. Okay. So I would like to move on to talking a little bit about the design space for the new mechanic for March of the Machine, which is battles. So battles, when I first saw battles, I was like, what is happening? Actually, like, I don't really understand what this thing is doing. And this whole idea of having like this almost a mini game is what I like to see it as. It's a mini game where you play it and then you have a side quest. And if you can complete the side quest requirement, which essentially is knocking off all of the defense counters of the card of the battle, then you get a reward. And the reward is the backside of the card. So talk to me a little bit about the design space of battles and how that came about.
Yeah, it was challenging. I mean, again, yeah, I'd led War of the Sparks, so I felt like there were going to be some overlaps and challenges, although the cards actually play pretty differently. But yeah, like I'm trying to think, like, this was not something that was handed off. Like, my team and I pretty much just created that as like the first thing that we did in set design. Right, like we talked a lot about, like, well, we wanted to represent the planes. Like, how do we represent the planes? We're also trying to show a war. So, like, we're trying to show a war on the planes. Right, like yeah, like we like some idea like that there had to be sort of a contest for a card in some way. Right, like at some point it was just a matter of like connecting a lot of the pieces. Like people were saying words like, oh, like, yeah, like, oh, maybe you can attack them like planeswalkers, and maybe their DFCs, and maybe the back of the DFC is like related to what happened in the war, and like kind of just people, people saying that things out loud, and like people on my team kind of connecting the dots on like, these are all the things I'm hearing that sound good. Right, like, and I think once we'd latched onto the idea, like I definitely was like, all right, I want these to work mechanically. Like, if you know what planeswalkers do, I want you to be able to understand what these do pretty easily. Like, I wanted them to like, right, like we did versions where like maybe you had to kill them all in one shot, or right, like, like, but it's like, no, yeah, like, no, I like just in terms of like, how are they attacked and all that sort of like, it's like, I just want them to work as much like planeswalkers as possible on the other side of the board. And then like, again, I felt like, certainly I was like very nervous about what the real world would think. Like, I feel like anytime you do something like this, it's like, like we do testing and stuff, but I don't really know what the world's going to think of these. Yeah, I mean, I've been really happy with, yeah, just in general, the response. Like, yeah, there are just so many advantages they have over. So, like, at least, like, I mean, they're just different than planeswalkers, but like some of the things I knew that people didn't like about planeswalkers, I knew wouldn't apply here. Like that, it's not like, oh, I play this, and if like it goes uncontested, like I just every turn I get further and further ahead, and that's frustrating. And maybe I didn't play the right cards to deal with it, and like it just a lot of the thing. Like, while they're a lot like planeswalkers in terms of like understanding the rules, they're like, yeah, they play a lot different. And I understood that the ways that they were going to play different, and it's just like, it's kind of cool that like, I mean, one thing they do kind of share is like people end up making kind of weird attacks to like, yeah, win sort of a mini game. And I felt like that would be fun, that like, right, that I knew that there would be like, they'd be artificially inflating life totals was like, actually kind of feel like a challenge all around, and recognizing that and knowing that and what that meant, and like how much life gained otherwise put in the set and things like that. But, right. And then just also making cards where, right, if your opponent's life total is lower than a battle's number of defense counters, it doesn't make any sense to attack it, and unless you make other cards where it matters. Like, so the War Historian, and the I'm blank on the name of the 2-mana, like the untap a land creature, like where those can actually change the question. Like,
Portent Tractor, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I've definitely had games where like my battle is at more defense than my opponent's life, and I'm still attacking the battle because I'm attacking with a War Historian, and it has good attacks where I wouldn't otherwise have it.
Yes.
And making sure there were cards that were like that, and right, and then like beyond that, like, yeah, just like wanting to have a variety of things on the backs of the battles. I mean, the battles were really hard to develop. Right, like I know when we previewed the battles, especially for people with more of a constructed mindset, they're like, why are all the like battles that have removal so weak in their minds? And it's like, they were just, right, again, they were just way too snowbally. If like, yeah, if the, right, like the fight card, right, like if the, was it Invasion of Murganda, like, right, if that's like, I don't know, a 4-mana card or a 3-mana card or whatever, it's just like, all right, I kill your blocker and then I flip this, and it's like, I snowballed you so badly that it's just like, it's just not fun. So, yeah, I mean, again, I think we landed in like a pretty good spot on all of them. I mean, it's like, I guess it's debatable. Like, I'm trying to think, like Invasion of Chandelure, Lorwyn.
I think Invasion of Karsus is actually a good example that I wanted to bring up. Like, Invasion of Karsus is the 4-mana red rare battle, and enters the battlefield, deals 3 damage to each creature and planeswalker. And then it's really interesting to me that the backside of it is a 4/4 ward 2, ward pay 2 life, and then whenever you cast a spell, it deals 2 damage each opponent. It's very interesting to me, this one, because the design space is like, on the front side it's a control card, and then on the back side it's like a damage card. That one was very weird to me. Can you elaborate a little bit on that one, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, like, right, like it's a lot of, I mean, like we have a few sweepers like Fiora too, where like we knew, right, that there's going to be a range of like, this is just going to, there are going to be times when it's appropriate to play this. And then, yeah, like, I mean, you can also, like, you could have more of a controlling deck, and maybe you're killing it off with like burn cards, or like some of the new like burn cards that go after battles, and you're getting something out of that. Like, again, it probably wouldn't be like a pure control deck. But yeah, so some of it's just like putting stuff that felt fun and flavorful to the world. Like a lot of what's on the back of these two are just trying to be, while we may not know much about Karsus, but yeah, just stuff that's flavorful. Like, I mean, that text is what, like, reminiscent of Gutter Snipe, which is like one of the more popular Magic cards around. And like, oh, well, you know, we'll make a more impressive Gutter Snipe. We also like, we needed stuff on the back that like people, we like, these cards also fail as its card type if people aren't trying to flip them. So like, right, it's like we want to make the back sides of these appealing, because like, yeah, if you're not flipping them, there wasn't much point to making the mechanic. Like, I mean, we definitely were trying to give you, I don't know, like 80-90% of a card on the front to get you to play it in the first place, and then yeah, you're getting the, you know, you're getting perhaps like another 50% of a card on the backside, but then like you're not always going to be able to get the backside, and right, that's kind of the balance that we're trying to strike, where right, that the balance then equals, like, on average you're still getting a normal card's worth, but like, yeah, trying to find the balance of how much strength is on the front versus the back.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to talk about, and this is another like sort of Magic the Gathering philosophy type question, and do we feel that we are pressured into designing sets that are both fun for new players and existing players? So I feel like the booster pack, the design space for the booster pack is like very restricting in a way, where it's very complicated because you have to like cater to EDH players, have to cater to limited players, have to cater to casual players, and also new players as well. March of the Machines has been this sort of format that has been very rewarding for me, specifically because of the complexity and these decision trees. So I had a draft the other day where one of my viewers made me laugh so hard because turn one, which land to play, I had a decision tree that stemmed out from which land I had to play on turn one. Right, so each land I played, it actually created a different decision tree having different implications, and I'm like tanking on turn one to like figure out like which land is correct to play on turn one. And it was extremely rewarding. It was extremely fun. But is this a problem for newer players as well? Is this a problem that we have to address when we're designing sets?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, complexity is a pretty long topic in terms of this. Like, right there are just so many different types of complexity. I mean, I do feel like I'm a pretty big believer. Let's see if I can even like speak to my own like sort of way I see things. But yeah, like I'm a pretty big believer in terms of like letting it be easy for someone to make a good decision. Like I care very little that someone's gonna like make the best decision, is more or less my philosophy. Like, so long as you're feel like, okay, like I'm in this, I'm going to think about it for a little while. Okay, I think I can make a good decision. Like, I don't really care if you made the best decision. Like, sure. I mean, like, right, again, like, I think the danger is if I'm putting people in a decision where they like, I can't even make a good decision, right? Like and that can be not only in gameplay, but in draft. Like, some of the early versions of like Ikoria draft, like creature type just mattered a ton. Like, you could only mutate on creatures that shared a creature type. So like, you'd get in a draft and it's like, all right, I have like a cat and a nightmare, and like now I have like, yeah, this an elemental, and it's like I don't know, like you get the next pack and it's like, I don't know, like I don't know, like like there's just too much going on, and like, yeah, and then there are other things in the set, and it's just like this is just too hard a decision for me, and like I don't even feel like I can make a good decision. So yeah, whether it's in the draft itself or in the gameplay, like I definitely like, I'm a big believer in just like, yeah, like if like sometimes people are like, this is too complicated, and it's like, well, yeah, like what do you mean by that? And like a lot of times I feel like people are like yeah, like, you know, can I figure out like the perfect sequencing? And like I just feel like that's very, at some level, like that, like that's kind of what we want. Like I think we want our game to be skill testing to a point. Like, we don't want it to be too skill testing, and like, and then like beyond all the stuff I'm talking about, I still think it's important to have, you want at least one color pair to be easy.
Like a blue-white deck, like kind of like a blue-white.
Yeah, like at least in this format, I think that counts for the most part. But yeah, like often red-green is that, not to give red green a hard time as a color pair, but yeah, just like right, like, yeah, you kind of like, you play your cards, you turn them sideways, and like, I don't want to oversimplify it, but like, yeah, that like every set needs at least something that's pretty straightforward, and the cards don't have a lot of words. And like, again, I'm as guilty of like putting words on cards as anyone. I do try to. I try to be very aware of making my words count. I have like the wordiest sets pretty much these days, but I try not to put extraneous words on sets like in cards. Like if, right, like I'll come back to my people later, like on my team, and it's just like, are these words doing anything, right? Like and I don't want to put a lot of words on cards we're not going to play with anyways. Like, just like, why am I reading all these words in this card on the draft that I'm never going to play with anyways? I try to avoid. I'd rather just take the words off or whatever, or redesign the card so that it's like, yeah, again, like, I try to make my words count, even though I use a lot of them.
Nice. So I actually had this situation come up in one of my other drafts, and so I had this deck that companioned Lutri, and it's a 4-color deck that was basically splashing the Hoarding Broodmaster, which is the dragon, like the Convoke Dragon. And it was so much fun to play, but my realization to this draft is that it only went 4 wins. But honestly, I think that if I had like Max Mick, or if I had Sam Black or LSV, or Raphael Levy, or you joining me on that draft, I think that deck could have gone 7 wins, right? Where it was like, it wasn't a fault of the deck, it was a fault of me as a pilot just not being necessarily like good enough, right, to like do this deck justice. And it was this very strange situation where I had the Invasion of Amonkhet on the board, and my opponent had played Vorinclex, milling themselves 10, and I had the Atraxas Fall in my hand, which destroyed either a battle or an enchantment, or a creature with flying, something like that. And it was like this spot where actually Atraxas Fall does not flip a battle. However, it does get the battle into the graveyard, which I then could use my Invasion of Shendalar to bring it back and then mill my opponent for lethal. So my opponent had 2 cards in their deck, and I could have gotten it back, not flipping the battle, and then play my Invasion of Shendalar to come back and then mill my opponent. So it's like, I was like, oh my goodness, how was I supposed to, as a player, figure that out? How was I supposed to figure that out? Because it was like, this invasion, normally you don't want to use it on a battle because it doesn't flip it. So then why is that in my thought process, right? Like, why do I want to hold that in my thought process? So that was extremely it wasn't necessarily frustrating. It was just mind-opening. I was just like, wow, if I was a better player, I could have figured this out and I could have won this game. But I wasn't, and I didn't get there. But I learned a lot. I learned so much about myself. I learned much about the format and about like how to think about cards, and it was amazing. Such an amazing experience that I was just sitting there like, wow, thank you, Dave. I appreciate this sort of mastery you have as a game designer. And I believe that you went to MIT. Is that correct?
Yeah, for grad school. Yeah, I have a PhD in biology that I have not used after leaving that building, but yeah, I do.
I mean, I very much see you as a sort of like master architect and this sort of PhD in biology, whereas like this might not necessarily like emphasize those skills directly, but it really does kind of showcase your mastery and your and your doctorate level expertise on how to think about designing and creating all these things where something like that is even possible. So huge appreciation to you, Dave, there, where I don't know who else could do it. I'm
gonna say, and again, a lot of that just comes out. I mean, I don't know that I would have seen that line. I mean, there are a ton of little decisions. Like another thing that comes to mind was I'm gonna blank on the card, but the Convoke card that puts a card 2 from the top or on the bottom. Like, I know that was one of the things where, like, down to the wire, I was like, it was putting the card on top, and I like really fought for it to like, no, it needs to go second from the top, and it was like,
okay.
Like actually kind of a contentious debate down to the wire, and it's like, we have this major mill theme, and it's like, I think at some point that was an instant, and it was going to the top, and it's like, that's cool, that's fine, that does what it needs to do. But like when we change to a sorcery, I'm like, it really needs to go second from the top so that you have a chance to like untap and then mill it. And so like I do feel like there are just a lot of little things like that where like I've played enough decks like that where I know like, yeah, like it's gonna be so much more reliable and fun if like you can, right, if it goes second from the top, it's gonna actually give me a chance to mill it with these cards that mill, and I can play around it. And that's, I mean, I do think that's the sort of things that I tend to see maybe more than some other people, but like, and it's like, again, I also play a lot of limited, like I play a ton of arena, and play all of everybody else's formats and my format. And so.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so one last question, like one last or second to last question I wanted to head on, I wanted to talk about before we move into a question and answer from the chat here, and obviously up to you to decide if you're able to answer these questions. I know that Wizards is very strict with like the sort of phrasing and the language and how and what we're allowed to talk about. So I would want to pick the questions that I like, that I think are interesting, and then I'll leave it to you to decide if you can answer that, or like maybe answer it in a way that you can. So people in chat, if you guys wanted to prepare your questions, we will be reaching that point soon. So one of the last things that I want to talk about is a card in this set that is very much a hot topic. I don't know if this card sees a lot of play in Constructed, but it is a rare 5-mana white card called Sunfall. So Sunfall is a card that is always on the back of my mind. If my opponent is playing even a single plains in their deck, right? Like this card is on my mind, and I'm like, and I would, the way I would describe it is almost paranoia, right? Like I'm like paranoid. Like, do they have a Sunfall? Do I need to play around Sunfall? Can I like, even considering like how to flip all these battles and everything, can I play my game in a way that I can still beat Sunfall if I have it? So I wanted to get your thoughts on if you think this is healthy for our formats. Do you think that this card is necessary for a format, and it especially being at rare rarity instead of a mythic rarity, it actually comes up more often than we would generally expect a mythic to as well?
Yeah, I mean they're definitely not important for limited, I would say. I mean, I do like, I mean, again, like I talked earlier about comebacks and stuff, and like I don't think that's the most satisfying way for there to be like comebacks in a game or anything,
Yeah.
but like it is nice to have them around a little bit. Like, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a good feeling that, yeah, like you feel like you always have to play around it. I think that's like probably mostly not a good thing. I mean, those cards are mostly there for constructed. I guess I do have more of a liking for situational wraths. Like I actually like, again, I feel like I'm somewhat, people have teased me at work about how many wraths I have in my set. Like if you go think back, if you think back to War of the Spark, right? Like what all creatures deal damage to themselves, if I'm remembering the card right. And there were things like that where I think like I'd rather have those, like just have a lot of kind of like situational wraths, I'd call it. Like you mentioned earlier that do 3 to everything. Like I think cards like that are kind of like more situational wraths, like I think are actually like pretty good and healthy for limited. But yeah, like Sunfall, like if we're designing just for limited, yeah, like Sunfall's not a card that exists. Sunfall's more, yeah, for constructed, and just at the power level that it needs to be to see constructed play, which it sees a little bit. Yeah, there's a lot of competition, right? Like in constructed, you can play a 4-mana wrath with some downsides, or you can play like what's I can't even think of like the name of the 1/1, where if like you cast it for 7 or more, you really crush your opponent. So like, right. So we need a card that's going to compete with a 4-mana wrath and compete like with that like sort of 7-mana wrath, and like, right, that leads us to a card of the power level of Sunfall. And like as to why it's not a mythic, I mean, like, again, I guess people can say what they think in chat or whatever, but like, right, like I feel like a lot of what we've told our players is that we're going to put those sort of effects at rare and not mythic, right? Like a lot of that is just like, if you're acquiring these cards for constructed, you don't really want to have to get like 4 mythic whatever sweepers, and that we've sort of set some precedent. I mean, there are definitely exceptions that I could name, but like we've sort of set precedent for like kind of sweepers usually being at rare. But yeah, like I mean, your channel might be biased with a bunch of limited fans, but Yeah, like, I mean, we certainly could move those to Mythic if that is important enough for the sake of limited. I mean, we do on a variety of other cards, we do late passes where it's like, all right, let's swap this up to rare, from rare to Mythic, even if it means like there's like kind of like the set structure looks a little weird. Like why don't all the Mythic, or why don't all the colors have the same number of Mythics or something like that? And it's
Sure.
like, well, that's probably because we made a late swap where like, yeah, we like this creature. It's usually a creature. Yeah, usually this creature is just like, this creature is too strong to be at rare, and we just rather have it at Mythic. And then there are times where we've missed. I led Amonkhet development where certainly we wish we had moved one rare to Mythic, but did not.
All right. Actually, one thing that I wanted to talk about that has just kind of skipped my mind is the set that had just released, I believe, yesterday or the day before yesterday, which is actually March of the Machine: The Aftermath. So I wanted to get your opinion on like kind of what this format was supposed to be and what the intention of Aftermath is. Like, what exactly is Aftermath?
Yeah, I mean, Aftermath is very story driven. It is right. Like a lot of it is just trying to like, yeah, I mean, the basis for it was very much story driven. It is. I mean, it is meant to be sort of a fun thing you can do on Arena, but it was not like designed to be like, this is right. Like we did not do a bunch of reps or like any reps on like, how do we make like this format better for like drafting? It's like, it's right there. There's small packs. Like we knew Arena might create something like they've created where like, oh, we'll seed it into packs, like one card per pack, and like, you know, that'll be fun, but like the designs are not meant to be for limited. Like I think, right, I mean, I've probably already done like 6 drafts of the format, and like, yeah, probably you end up with like on average 1 or 2 Aftermath cards in your deck, because like a lot of them are like, choose a planeswalker, or like enchant a legendary creature, or, you know, like I guess a lot of those are more the rares, but like, right, there's like, unless you get like, some of the uncommons are playable and some of the rares are playable, but for the most part, it was designed for constructed. I think it's kind of fun to do for limited. Like, again, I've been doing it. It's just an easy way to collect. Like, I already have like 4 of all the rares on my personal account. So at this point, it's like, you know, like this is just a way for me to acquire Aftermath cards. Like, I'll draft that instead. I think one of the commons gets replaced by an Aftermath card. So I'm like, just able to draft some extra uncommons and rares from a set that I don't have in my account yet. And I don't mind winning, the Aftermath packs. And so that, for me, it's just fun. Like, it's like, there's like some goofy card in here, and it doesn't take away from my experience, or like, and it's, again, it's a way for me to acquire the content in a way that's still pretty fun for me. So.
All right. So one very final question here for me before we get into the question and answer, and it is a loaded question, kind of a joking question as well, but feel free to answer this in however you like. Do you think that I would be good on your design team? Do you think that I would be a good person to have on your design team, and could I get a job in the design team?
Yeah, I have no idea. No, I mean, you think about it a lot. I think anybody that plays as much limited as you do, and like, it is exploring different. Like, I mean, you definitely are like taking approaches to the formats in different ways than other people, and like I think probably some of that's just part of your job of being entertaining, is that you can't just like, I'm gonna draft some really straightforward deck, right? But like, I think, right, I think people who are approaching the formats in the way you do are like valuable to have helping out. Like, I mean, beyond that, it's very hard to say, like, in terms of it takes, like I said, it takes a different mindset. It takes I don't know, like, if you felt like you understood some of the stuff I was talking about and that makes sense to you, and like a lot of it is, a lot of my job is being able to listen to other people's feedback. And I talk about this sometimes. Usually the feedback you get is telling you to do things, and the things that it's telling you to do is not like the right solution. Like,
Sure.
Very rarely is the public telling me like, oh, you should do this instead, and that's like the answer. That's like, but usually like what the public is telling me is at some level true. Like their experience is true. Like if they're telling me like, you know what, like I don't like this card, I don't like this format, I don't like this color pair. Like what they're saying at some level is just like, it's true. That is true for them. And then it's taking that feedback and knowing what to, trying to solve for them, because often they don't actually know what the solution is to their own issues with the format. Like they are correct about their experience, but like they don't necessarily know the right ways to fix it, or at least not the ways to fix it in ways that don't cause other problems or just aren't good for the game or whatever else. So it's yeah, I have no idea if you would be good at it, but yeah, I mean, I think you would certainly be a good candidate. And but yeah, it's right. Yeah. Like it's tricky. Just, yeah. A lot of my job is just, about learning how to listen to people and solve, like I sort of talked about how battles came about, and I'd compare it a little bit to that, where it's, I think I talk a little bit about like sort of one of my voice is gone, but like just like triangulating things, like you're getting inputs and it's like, all right, I'm getting these 3 inputs. Like what is the solution based on these 3 inputs, or what are the common themes I'm hearing, and how do I solve those problems? Because usually, again, like you're not really getting the answer from the public, and a lot of what we do, like we can't really rely on the public anyways.
Sure, exactly.
Just listening to the other people on my team and assuming that, like, that they're finding a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. Unfortunately, a lot of the people we hire are also good at like problem solving too. So,
all right. Yeah, Dave, let me know when there's a job opening that opens up on your team, and I will see if I can, if that makes sense. But one thing I also wanted to mention was thank you so much for putting up with a lot of my, like, I guess, sort of criticisms and my sort of attitude, I suppose, over the years as well, because, a lot of it is like trying to be an entertaining streamer and trying to be like informative as well. And I do think that a lot of times I do get kind of carried away with like the language and the sort of like ways that I talk about things. But end of the day, it's just like nothing but appreciation for you and your team and what you do for us, giving us like really, really fun things to do, and essentially like allowing us to make a living, right? Like me and the other content creators, whether they're limited or constructed, really much rely on you guys and the sort of mastery that you guys have to provide us a living and to keep things afloat and stuff like that. So thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth quickly saying, like, certainly the feedback, like, I feel like, again, part of our job is to listen to feedback, right? Like, I mean, there are people like Rosewater that are kind of famous for it and gets a lot of it, but like, I think few of us struggle with it if it's coming from a genuine place. I feel like, I think it also, people tend to get a little hyperbolic, which is sort of the nature of social media. Like certainly that makes things tricky at times. But I feel like if you're coming from an experience of like, this is my own experience, like one of the things I don't enjoy when people just try to generalize, like this format is bad. Everyone says this format's bad. Like that's the sort of stuff that like turns us off to feedback, where it's just like, don't tell me what other people like. Tell me, like, if you don't like something, if you don't like that, if like this is your personal experience, like I honestly think we enjoy that and love it, even if it's like really negative and critical. It's more when like, when you're trying to generalize or tell, like, this is a bad format. Like some of that I like, kind of really hate. Like it's like it's fine if you say like, I think this is like, like I don't enjoy this format at all, or I don't like this at all. But when it's like more like, like this is just a bad format, like that. Like, I feel like that's the sort of stuff where it's like, it's harder for us to do with anything, like, and trying to be like specific in your feedback, like, tell me why you think it's like, why you don't like this format, rather than, I don't know, like if you want us to do better and like learn from it and do better next time, it's like, it doesn't help us to like, unless you're being like somewhat specific and like why don't you like it? Or like, can you tell why you don't like it? Because that doesn't always come with the feedback sometimes, but.
Yeah, great. And I think that this sort of exercise here, what it provides as well is like a more healthy sort of conversation between like players, content creators, and design, staff like yourself. And I think that like kind of getting better at all of this, and finding better ways to do that, and having maybe more conversations now and then is something that's like very healthy. So that's another appreciation that I have for you coming on today as well, Dave. Thank you so much.
And I do want to say, I already see in chat, like, I didn't mean to be like, I didn't mean that to be a critique of you. I meant that to be a, like, I wasn't saying Deathsie is really not constructive or critical, you know, like, I did not mean to be singling you out. I meant just like, in general, if you want to be, you know, interacting with like the design leads and designers and people who work on Magic, just like, I mean that more generally. I definitely wasn't trying to give you a hard time.
Thank you so much. Yes, and honestly, like I take zero offense. You, Melissa, and all of the other WotC staff, I've had literally nothing but great experiences over the years. Just great appreciation for you guys. So let's go ahead and move into the Q&A session of the stream here. So we have maybe a little bit less than half an hour left for the time that we've allocated and booked here with Dave. So the first question that I wanted to start with was a question from Johnny Chimpo here in my chat. Johnny Chimpo asks, in your opinion, what makes you different from other set designers? So how do you design sets differently than others?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one to answer, since I feel like a lot of my job is trying to convey to other leads like the stuff that I do. I mean, I like to think a lot of it's just experience. I've been playing Magic since '94, and I've been, like I said, I've been doing this for 13 years at WotC. I did it for 8 years before at a different company. So a lot of it's reps. Like I do feel like just one of the things I'm really good at is iterating and getting better at things. Like even when I was like a pro player, like I feel like a lot of my strengths was just kind of like brute forcing stuff and keep testing the same thing over, keep playing. Like I'm not like people who know me like from the pro tour and stuff, like I am not a like fast player. Like when I'm playing a game of Magic, I am not fast. I'm very, very methodical, which like only tangentially relates to this question. But like, yeah, I'm pretty much like I'm sort of a bit of a brute forcer, where it's like I'm gonna keep working on this, keep iterating on this. I'm really good at iterating on things, which like I think does relate to a lot of why I end up making pretty good sets. But yeah, otherwise it's hard to answer that in a way that doesn't come off as kind of like snobbish or whatever.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
I mean, I do like definitely have like my own little takes. I mean, I think I've talked about some of those already, but like, yeah, that's, you know, I mean, I guess if I'd single out one thing, and I feel like something I've tried to express to others, and I think something that's different from earlier in Magic's history, I guess I'll say, rather than comparing myself to anybody else now, is just like, right, like we definitely made a lot of cards that I think were for no one in the past. Like I think, like, you know, there's sort of like, why does Magic make bad cards? And like we had all our reasons for why we make bad cards. Like and a lot of that made sense to me, but I like we sort of moved beyond that. Like when I'm looking at my file at the end, like every single card in my set better be like a card that somebody's going to tell me that they're going to play. Like it doesn't. There are going to be tons of cards when I hand off a set. Like I'm never going to play this card. It's just like. Yeah. Like, and it's funny, like even cards like you mentioned, like Atrax's Fall, like I don't know that I'd never play it, but I've played like probably like at least 50 drafts, and like I don't think I've ever included that card, and it's not because it's bad, but like it's just like whatever, it's not where I want to be. And like sure, like I think it's I think it's cool that other, like, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong to include it, might actually have like a much better win rate than I think, but like that's like not even the best example. But they're just like when I finish, I want like somebody on my team better be able to tell me like, yes, I want to play this card and I'm going to play it like in, you know, like more than, let's say more than 20% of my drafts.
Sure.
And like, I don't think that's something like we really tried to do in the past or prioritize. And I think that just makes the formats a lot deeper when, there's really not just chaff. There's not like, I mean, even with Mom, I feel like I think there are probably a few stinkers, but like, you know, I still, people, I don't know if the best bar is people play them against me, but like I you know, like what is it, like Vengeance Earth or whatever. I mean, even stuff like that, I still see play, and like I guess I could see playing, but like it's like, right, the bar is higher, right? Like
sure, yes, it is.
Cards and the synergy of cards is such that there almost by definition have to be some stinkers unless you build enough synergy into all your cards. But yeah, like I don't know. I think I'm always looking for ways to get cards to be more in line with my experience as a drafter. Like I said, I draft a lot. Like I know what cards have worked and not worked in past sets. I know what cards were really fun in past sets. Like I borrow a lot from my fellow lead designers where it's like, yeah, you did a really good job with this card. I'm going to put it in my set.
Sure.
It's a bit.
And I think that really shows, like, my tier list, honestly, as time goes on, especially with every draft set that you make, is that they're just less F tier cards. So I think the only like card that I have rated as F, like basically unplayable, is actually the Phyrexian Archivist, and I'm actually gonna move that card up to like a D minus. So like I just don't feel like there are actually unplayable cards in the format, which really is a good experience for me as a player and as a content creator. Like every single time I'm having a deck that is like doing something that I'm not playing cards that I don't want to play for the most part. So I think that has shown. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the Archivist is a good example. I mean I think part of the issue is that the land cyclers, like I think we did a lot of our testing without the land cyclers, but it's really hard to justify playing the Archivist when you could be playing any of the land cyclers,
yep,
I guess.
Exactly.
So, like but yeah, I have played it, and I brought it up earlier, but yeah, I played it in my what is it? Is a mode? I played it in some decks with the Modi and found it to be pretty reasonable there. Okay. Just in decks where I didn't end up with land cyclers, I played it in decks where I'm like just heavy on the blue-black self-mill. Like the whole reason it's in the set is like the blue-black like both mill, where it's just like a backup plan if you're really heavy on that and then just want to make sure like you have a card that you can play to not even necessarily like do the whole like I'm just gonna like draw the same 3 cards over, but just like I need to make sure I have a way to knock deck myself if certain things go wrong. So
sure. Okay, so here's a question from Jim Davis. Jim Davis, another content creator and professional player here. So Jim Davis asks, how do y'all view the mystical archive sheets going forward? So Jim says he's found them to be a blast and bring a really unique element to the draft formats that they appear in, allowing from really crazy backdoor decks and a lot of replayability. And also, how do you feel about the increase in rares per pack that these these bonus slots creates?
Yeah, so like I mean I love them. So Yanni Skolnick had led Strixhaven and Brothers of War, and I was like, yeah, I'm very jealous of this. I want to put this in my sets too. I think the tricky thing is there's like again part of it is just like finding cards that people want for constructed. There are a lot of those, but like we also need to have themes that make sense. Like I feel like I don't know that like every set can do them, just because like at some point we kind of like we'd burn through all of that material pretty fast, and like there just needs to be a cohesive theme. Like some sets are set up for that better than others. Like what is like, right? We're going to have a sheet, and this is what's in common about all the cards on the sheet. I think I mean, like we could kind of just put random cards on there, but I think there needs to be something cohesive. So some of it is like trying to figure out what that is and what makes sense for that. We've done a good job with that so far, but I don't know that we could easily just do it set after set after set where it wouldn't start getting to be old. I mean, I think just with a lot of things, like I feel like if we get too much in the model of like we're gonna do this thing and keep repeating it over and over, it just gets less interesting. The examples I'm thinking of I don't want to use, but right, like I still think we need good reason doing it. But I love them. As for the rarity and having more rares, I mean, I think then overall that's just a matter of process. Like right, like in this set, like well for one thing, like each bonus sheet could have very different ramifications, like, right? Like the Strixhaven sheet is like instants and sorceries. So like you'd maybe want different cards to interact with those. Like maybe, like a card like Negate becomes more playable.
Yes.
With the Brothers War sheet, like Disenchants become more playable.
Yes.
Like,
and maybe with this set, like maybe removal has to be almost like a little bit better in a way. Like removal has to be like better. Some of that.
Yeah. And that was very much on our mind. Like the red card, like, the red card would usually only do 5 damage. We had to do 6 damage. We just like in general had more removal and stronger removal than we normally would, which runs into some dangers for limited. Like if that there's a chance that leads to a format that's just kind of like about card advantage and removal, which is fine for a lot of players, but not necessarily where you always want to be. So yeah, like we need to have answers. Like I think like the best way I can generalize it is like I think the most important thing is we don't want people to feel helpless. Like I guess that's the best way that I distill it. That if your opponent plays a bomb, there better be a card that we've given you that you were able to put in your deck that's going to be able to answer it most of the time. Like, there are going to be certainly exceptions, but like, right, we want you to at least have seen cards in draft that you could have like, oh, I should have taken that, like whatever it is. Like I should have taken that, like, a lot of sets leads to this even more than I do, but like I should have taken that 6 mana, like kill a card, kind of kill anything card. Actually tend to do that example a little bit less, but like I think other leads tend to even do that, or even more, where it's like if you really wanted like a 6 mana kill anything, answer anything, it was going to be there because it was weak enough that it's like actually like probably like a 10th pick or whatever, and you could have had an answer to their bomb. But just generally, like, we don't want people to feel hopeless, and make sure there are enough cards that like no matter what your opponent plays, there was a card in your deck or a card you could have taken for your deck that gave you a shot. But it's, I don't know. I'm excited to keep doing more of these. I think it adds to replayability. It just like,
Sure.
It's a big part of the reason that you can do your 100th draft if you're so inclined.
Yes, that is going to be me. I think I'm going to do like 200 drafts of this format. I'm expecting, honestly. Like this format, oh my gosh. I am so addicted, Dave. I'm so addicted. Like, I am so happy with this set. So thank you very much for that. So we have a question here from Max Mick. Max Mick, you probably know him from the from WotC. I believe that he did an internship there.
Yep.
Yeah, so Max Mick asks, building on the discussion of dealing with feedback, how do you approach acting on feedback based on the different types of players? Do you have to factor in that a piece of feedback may come in from a more casual player versus someone like Deathsie or I, who are going to try very hard and play a ton and have different wants and needs than everyone else?
Yeah, I mean, so some of that is like potentially just our ability to identify who's speaking to us, which like, the feedback we're getting from different people, and like, we can't just only act on like tastemakers. I mean, it's tricky because like in some ways it's pretty important, like that tastemakers, like you all like our stuff, right? Like it's pretty perilous to put out a set that like, if our tastemakers don't like it and tell the world that, it's not gonna work out well for us. But at the same point, we definitely have to strike a balance. Like we can't just be making, like I could certainly quote other people out there that are like, I wish there were no rares and limited, and like rares are bad for limited, right?
Then sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
That's not right. That's not what our casual players want. That's like not even what most of our players want. So we definitely have to keep in mind who the feedback's coming from. I think a lot of where things are at now is trying to strike that balance, right? Yeah, like I talked about how we need some archetypes to be easy to get into. Just like, right. I mean, I could get into sort of the fire philosophy, which I think gets misunderstood a lot, but the eye in fire is inviting, which a lot of that is for the new player, or the person we're trying to onboard, or the person that's still new to the game, or inviting like is huge for that. Like that's right. That's where, right. Some of my sets more like, I guess Dominaria probably like excels in that. Like if there's one letter of fire that Dominaria is all about, it's inviting. Like it's a pretty easy set to get into, I think.
Yep, it is.
And like we need to keep that in mind and like be making sets like that, and not like all of our, like some of our sets are gonna fire on some of those letters harder than others, and I think we want to balance. Like I don't think we want all of our sets to be like kind of equal on all those things. I think we want ebb and flow of like some of these sets are going to be meeting some needs better than others. I think like I tend to be leading the spring sets, which I think have a little bit more flexibility to be complex just in terms of like player pathing, right? Like I think we get the biggest influx of players, I think, usually like in the fall with rotation. That's when we especially, I think, want things to be more accessible. And then like people who have, kind of like if you're sticking it out, maybe like by the spring, you want something a little, you want to get more of a taste of something a little bit more complex. But like it's, in terms of feedback, it's sometimes tricky to know where people are coming from. Like, but I do feel like we get a sense of We have a variety of ways to get feedback, right? Like we do other surveys, and part of those surveys that we put out to the public on various like websites and stuff are like, when did you start playing Magic and things like that. And so like we can certainly filter and see like, right, where in a pretty systematic fashion, what are the people that are new to the game saying about the game? Do they like it? Is it like, do only enfranchised players like March of the Machine, and like new players are actually struggling with that, and I won't even know it because like I'm only hearing from like all these people are like, oh yes, I love all this depth and stuff, and like I've somehow lost the new players. And
Sure.
we do get a sense of that from, especially from our surveys. Like social media is a little bit hard because like that, even social media people talking about Magic are probably already pretty enfranchised and pretty
Yep.
far along. So yeah, we have routes to get that information, and yeah, we are trying to take all parties into account.
Okay, so a good follow-up question here from Ignis, and feel free to either answer this question in the way that you can, or refuse not to answer. I'm not sure if you can, but Ignis asks, do you guys design sets with EDH in mind? Because it feels to me that it is becoming more and more apparent that this is so.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. Is Melissa still in here? Yeah, I mean, we, like, right? Like Melissa's whole group is about giving me feedback on Commander play. I mean, not just Commander play, but casual play in general. So yeah, we definitely take it into account. I think, right, it is our most popular format, at least in paper.
Yep.
So yeah, we would be remiss not to be taking into account a lot. Again, this is where a lot of this is about me listening to other people. I'm not a big Commander player. I'll play it once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I need to understand what it's all about. It is funny, like historically I'll have a set come out and like I'll get like, here's, some article somewhere about like all these great cards for Commander, and like a lot of that is just me trying to make, at least especially in the past, like me trying to make cool cards, right? Like I don't if I make cool cards, a lot of them are going to be cool for Commander. I don't like it. And again, like I don't want to like simplify it, and I feel like Melissa and her group have given us a much better understanding of that. And like we like also that philosophy, like in some ways, like when we try to make cards for Commander early on, we like actually were just screwing up. Like think back to like Gate Crash, where there was is it Sylvan Primordial? I'm not good with card names, but especially since the names changed by the time they come out. But
Okay.
right, like where it's like, oh, it's like destroying stuff and ramping stuff, and it's like it's strong in Commander, but it's not fun in Commander. So like again, Melissa's team's giving us a much better insights onto like what's actually fun, not strong. Trying to make Commander as a format fun, but I guess yeah. The bottom line is like I design a lot of cards. My team designs a lot of cards. A lot of those players don't play Commander, and they're just making cool cards, and they happen to be legends. And that doesn't mean we're like, it's not like, I worry that some people feel like we're not designing cards for them anymore if they don't play Commander, and that like that, I mean, that couldn't be further from the truth for me. Like I am designing first and foremost for Standard and Limited because that's what I play and that's what I know. Other people on my team are designing cards. Like I have a lot of people on my teams that play Commander, and they're designing Commander cards, I assume.
Yep.
And trying to make stuff for that. But at the same time, like, every one of those cards they design, I'm trying to figure out how to tweak the card so that it sees play in Standard and Limited in addition to whatever goals they had. And then like, right, then it's just trying to find the balance, right? The like, all the work I'm doing is trying to make it see Standard because these are Standard legal sets, and that's like what I love. And I'm trying to like, I want it to be good in Commander and I want it to be good in Standard. And like by talking to that person that designed that card and by talking to Melissa and her group, Casual Play Design, I'll figure out hopefully the best of both worlds, right? Like I'm very much all about like we can make this card good in both places. Sometimes we give up on that. Sometimes like Standard and play design and doing FFL is like, whatever. This card's just really not that fun. Like we don't like. Let's just make this as good and fun as we can for Commander, and like we'll kind of give up on this card for Standard, and that happens sometimes. But I try not to let that happen. Like I don't want to make too many cards that we just give up on for Standard. Like I want them at least. I'm not speaking like this needs to be a tier 1 card or anyways, but I don't want somebody to play this card and then FFL and sort of like people are like kind of scoffing that they're playing that card, or like that, like right? I want to put the card at the rate like that it gives it a chance for success, even if it's not like a tier 1 card. Like if you show up and play your like, your Ikoria card in Aftermath at your FFL, like that we put it at a rate where it's not embarrassing. Like you're gonna still have a chance, even if if you've built your deck properly, you're still gonna win games and have fun. And so like, I guess the long short, I'm trying to make these cards for, I guess I focused on standard, but like, I like, certainly there are like some subset of cards that I'm like, oh, well, if, right, every card's got to be for someone somewhere. Like, we don't want to be making like, if it's not like, it can still be for modern, or it can be for legacy, or it can be whatever. But like, yeah, well, like there's no place really making cards that are not for anyone, anywhere, in any format. Like, again, which I think we had done in the past at times.
I think you guys did an amazing job. Honestly, like, I came into this format kind of feeling like this was more catered towards EDH players and maybe constructed, and boy, was I wrong. Like, even the draft environment, like, I feel like you've hit all of the boxes. I don't know much about standard, but I assume that, that these cards are being that are seeing play in standard, and so I feel like in some way, I don't know how you do it, but you've done it again, Dave. Like, you've made it fun for everybody, and somehow you've catered to everybody. So, Melissa being in chat here, Melissa said, yes, I'm still here, and we do design with EDH in mind. Our goal is to design cards for everyone, not trying to steal Dave's spotlight, though. And she adds that we started putting more emphasis on commander design in roughly Ikoria, the first commander product tied to a set, and started a dedicated team for it about 2 years ago with Brothers War. So thank you for that, Melissa, as well. Yeah, I mean, you've done it again, Dave. Like, I don't even know. Like, I want to play this set, March of the Machine, for another like 150 drafts or something. And honestly, I will probably be waiting for the set to come back as a flashback draft on Magic Arena as well. Okay, one last question here. Let's do one last question, and then we'll let Dave go here. So, Smash Jacks, thank you for the 10 gifted in sub as in chat as well, Smash Jacks. Smash Jacks asks, how do you guys decide on a drop rate? It feels like some cards have a crazy low drop rate. I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to by drop rate. Maybe he means like rarity? Like, how do you guys design cards based on rarity?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of drop rates, like, yeah, most cards at any given rarity should be showing up about the same. There's some trickiness with like DFCs or things that end up appearing like one card, like there's one battle per pack and there's one Phyrexian DFC per pack, and some of those rates are off a little bit from like a normal rate, but they're not that far off. So yeah, mostly like all cards should be showing up at the same rate. I think it's just mostly variances, maybe what you're seeing here or there. It's for like stuff in general in terms of rarity. Commons are very much just about what are the staple effects that we need for limited. Uncommon, I have a reputation also for making sort of cards at a time feel rare at uncommon in some of my sets. Thinking to like the Garna and Dominaria or cards like that come to mind.
Or maybe like Strobe Knight in the set, like the 3-mana 2/2 flyer, Zarek's Strobe Knight. It feels real good.
Yeah. There are a lot of them. Every set has a few of them. I'm trying to think in like Neo, there was the, what is it? Whenever you discard a card, you can play it, the like 2-mana 2/1 artifact or something. But yeah.
Yes.
I don't know. There's only so much room for rares. At some point, you run out of slots for rares, and then I put them at uncommon. But if I think they're going to be cool for limited too, and don't like wreck limited. But yeah, like I'm just.
I love it.
I mean, already at uncommon, I'm trying to make exciting cards. Like the other philosophy is sort of thing. Like again, not that necessarily other people don't believe this too, but like I definitely want. Right, like especially in limited, like I want you to want to play your cards. Like I feel like this stems and relates to a lot of the other points I've made. But like I'm sort of over with the days of like I have to like play this card. I don't want to play this card, and it's fun because I like have to figure out how to play this card, and it's bad. And like I just like I pretty much just want you to be. I want exciting moments. I want memorable moments. I want to include cards that, in some ways, I probably lean a little bit more high variance. Like I also have like a really high tolerance for bombs and stuff. Like, which I don't know. I guess could have been part of some of my other answers, like in terms of the bonus shoots. Like somebody beats me with a rare, whatever. Like, yeah, just like I have a really high tolerance for losing to bombs, which is I've learned that I need to dial that back out because I was also the lead of like Fate Reforged and some other sets that didn't go over well with tastemakers in terms of some of the earlier questions too. But so yeah, I learned to dial it back, learn to make better answers. But I have a high tolerance for that. I had like a pretty fun related point to make, but I think I lost it. But yeah, like again, yeah, like I mean, rares and mythics, like I feel like mostly you have to put at the rates that we need them for constructed. I'm a pretty big believer for the most part, and yeah, like those cards need to serve constructed, and we'll find out ways to. I mean, I think one of the nice things about like some of our more recent sets too is just that there's more synergy and like you can beat strong rares just because we've been designing the commons and uncommons at higher power levels so they can compete with them better, especially once you're using synergies. So I feel like we've also sort of modern draft design, I think, is dealing with bombs better just because like you can compete with them. Just if your deck's working, your deck's going to be able to do stuff that's strong enough to compete with them in ways that didn't work out in the past. But yeah, man, I forgot the other point. But yeah, like, yeah, I definitely have a high tolerance for bombs.
Yeah, and
what else I like is it.
And actually, Melissa here in chat chimes in. We like to call those Dave uncommons. I love it. I love it.
But yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, like yeah, just like I'm all about. I'm all about yeah, like just letting there be cool moments, right? Like a lot of times I'm trying to think of like some of like this isn't the best example, but like the what is it? Spinning wheel kick, spinning flying kick. What was the card called in Neo?
Yeah, in Cons of Tarkir, right?
And then like in Neo, it's like the
Neo.
target creature fights X target.
Oh, yes, the green spell. Yes.
Not fights, but bites X creatures. Right, where there's just a ton of feedback. I got so much feedback on the card that like, this is not fun. My opponent blew me out. Like, get this card out of here. And like, I guess like, I don't know. I might be curious where people end up on that, but that was just one of those ones like, I don't care. This card, like, if you're gonna spend like 6 mana or 8 mana, like people should get like. I realize we made that an X spell, but like, I guess like at some points I think it was maybe just a 6 mana card, like only, or like, I'm just fine with that. Like, right, like let there be spectacular, memorable moments. Like, I feel like so much of our job is about making memorable moments, like, right, like that you actually remember years ago things that happened in formats. Yes, you might have got blown out, but you also might have blown someone out. And like, I'm like, I guess sets I lead, you will continue to see cards like that. Yeah, like you get blown out, like go on and play the next game. Like I don't know, like I'm sure I'm losing some of my amount of my audience that's just like, yep, like put down my headset, walk away, and don't come back. But like I'm a pretty believer that we need those emotional high moments, and I'm all about them. Like I think a lot more than many people.
Yeah, I really like that. It's almost like a Kodak philosophy, I think. Like, you make memorable moments. And in the set already, March of the Machine, I've had so many memorable moments. And these moments are like moments that I walk away from my stream and I'm just thinking like, wow, that was really great. And sometimes it's my opponent blowing me out too. Sometimes I'm just like, wow, that was like a really great moment. Like, man, I can't stop thinking about that. You know, it just really sticks there in my mind. So, Dave, thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time, the time from your very, very busy life and your very, very important work to come join us here on my stream for an exclusive interview. And, a lot of appreciation from you, from me, a lot of appreciation from you in chat. So, thank you so much. And, if you had any final words to say, Dave, I would love to hear your thoughts on being here today.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I don't although I have a lot of extra additional thoughts. But yeah, it's fun. It's great to be here. It's great to get a chance to interact with people that are, yeah, like, I mean, I think like, yeah, a lot of people in your chat are definitely big fans of Limited. And I like, yeah, I definitely, as I hopefully have made clear, yeah, like I definitely am thinking about that audience a ton as I design. And like, yeah, it is funny. Like, I guess I will say, like, I remember when that set first came out and you wrote up like a four or five like thread thing on Twitter, and it was like, it was very pessimistic sounding.
Yes,
I'm like,
yes, it was.
like you probably haven't even played the set, or maybe you did in the sneak peek. I don't know, but like, I don't know. Yeah, it's just one of those things where, yeah, like, I mean, again, I know, like, and it wasn't even, you were like, I see why they're doing this, and I see like why it makes sense, but like, I'm worried that this is not for me. And like, you know, I'm reading that and I'm like, definitely, this is still going to be for you. Like, don't worry. Like, again, like we certainly have the Limited player in mind and are very, right. We're very aware of the dangers with some of the stuff we were doing, but like, yeah, we are so very much trying to prioritize like, yeah, the Limited experience too. So.
You know, one of the things as a Magic player and as a streamer, one of the things is like, it might sound very weird to people, but I love it when I have like a very critical take and I'm wrong. Like, I love being wrong. Like being wrong is almost like one of my joys in life, of like, and especially in Magic too, like when I'm wrong about cards, right? So it'll be like at a card evaluation, I'll be like, oh, I don't think this card's gonna be good, but I would love to play it more and kind of figure it out. And I know that didn't come across in the in that thread I wrote, and I was feeling pretty down. I was like, man, you know, coming off of a set that I kind of didn't enjoy that much. It was a set that I qualified for both the Pro Tour and also the Arena Championship 2 with. Phyrexia Albi won, and I was just like, oh my goodness, having almost like an existential crisis of being like, what am I gonna do for a living? Am I gonna be able to like play more Magic, do more content kind of thing? And I was very, very happy to be wrong. Like, oh my gosh, boy, was I like the furthest possible from the truth. This format has been an absolute blast, and yeah, and I can't wait to play much more of that, Dave.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks all the people that tuned in too.
All right, Dave, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Have a good rest of your night with the family, and yeah, I hope to speak to you much more, and you know, maybe we can do some more of these from time to time. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, see you next time. Maybe when my next set comes out.
Nice. I'm down. Let's a pencil in. Maybe we can get approval from Blake over at WotC as well.
All right.
All right.
Thanks. See y'all.